Hey there, YouTube. Today I wanted to tell another story, and this one's going to be from my experience as a Lyft driver. I was a Lyft driver in Los Angeles for around 3 years, and in that time, I gave rides to something like 20,000 people, which, can lend itself to quite a lot of stories. And one in particular always stood out to me as something that really made an impact on the way I kind of view masculinity and the way I try to talk to a lot of my male friends or other guys that I meet. And essentially, what had happened was I had picked up this gentleman, and he was heavy set, Hispanic guy, very like machismo dressed, just kind of looked like a tough guy, and he reeked of tequila, and I thought I knew what the interaction would be like because I've given plenty of rides to sort of, similar guys, and I couldn't have been more wrong. Immediately, as soon as we started driving and I said, "How was your day?" He just started crying. This like 45-year-old man just started crying, and he sat in my front seat, so he's just sitting right next to me sobbing. And I ask him, like, what happened? Are you okay? And he proceeds to tell me that that day, his best friend from growing up was hit in a hit and run accident right in front of his house. Was killed pretty much instantly. And it happened in front of his kids, his small children. So it's a terrible thing to have happen, especially to, as I found out, was his oldest childhood friend, and he was godfather to those kids. So that's a lot that he was experiencing, and he was just going through it. And as he was crying, he kept apologizing, kept saying, he's not trying to cause any problems or, you know, trying to act tough in general, but he couldn't do it. And he started holding his chest and saying that his chest was tight and he wasn't sure if he was okay. And I asked him, had he ever felt that before? And he said one time when his mother died. And that just melted me. I mean, it's not very likely a medical thing. Of course, always get things checked. But, I told him, hey, man, that's grief. That's anxiety. You're having a panic attack right now. You've just been through a really traumatic thing, and it's normal. It's okay to feel this. It's a lot you're going through. And as we approached his destination, again, he was very drunk, so I had to park and help him out of the vehicle. And as I got him out of the vehicle, he looked at me and he kind of kept looking down and up, and he didn't want to like meet my eye. But then he just looked me right in the eye and he said, I don't want to be gay or nothing, but can I get a hug? And I just reached out and gave him a hug, and I just told him as I'm holding him, there's nothing gay about asking for help. There's nothing gay about asking for a hug. There's nothing wrong in general with just being not okay and letting people know that you're not okay. And that, I hope, left an impact on him. I have no idea what happened to him afterwards. And after that incident, I couldn't even keep working. I tried for a minute, and I just ended up having to go to a Denny's, and I got a cup of black coffee at like 2, 3 in the morning, and I just sat there thinking, just thinking about how many men have grown up thinking that it's not okay. It's not okay to be not okay because you have to be strong, right? You have to be the one that's okay for everyone else. You can't show those feelings. And in even a deeper level, if you are involved in certain communities or organizations that demand a level of public strength, you can't show that kind of weakness. You can't be vulnerable like that. Except for you can. You absolutely can, and it's important that you do. I mean, look at like even like The Sopranos, this entire show about a tough guy who's having panic attacks. Obviously there's a problem, in men's mental health where, you get a lot of guys that grew up with really tough dads, men that formed them into something to conquer the world. They taught them that life would be hard and they needed to be hard in order to deal with it. And for a lot of men, this was a survival mechanism. This was built upon actual things that maybe they went through, and they were trying to maybe ineffectually give tools to their kids the way they were given tools from their parents. And it's made me reflect a lot on this song I really like. I want to say it's called "Growing Sideways" by Noah Kahan, and there's a line in it, and it says, "I'm still angry at my parents for what their parents did to them." And if you think about it, the way we're raised, it's a series of events. It's a chain of interactions between the generations based upon real things, based upon culture, based upon economic opportunities, based upon trauma that was taken in, based upon the necessities of survival that our parents, our grandparents, and onward had to go through. And I think about the way I was raised, and I was largely raised by my grandfather as far as like a masculine representation in my life. I mean, I had uncles as well, but as far as like a father figure, other than just having my mom being both mom and dad, I was really raised by my grandpa. Her father, and he's the perfect example of someone who grew up and had to live a pretty hard life. He grew up in a really tough area in New York, in the Bronx, where, he got involved with local, criminal activity at a very young age, and he did it as a survival mechanism. He had to get involved with more and more activities in order to just keep himself safe and to be a part of his community in a way that gave him any sense of status or importance. And after that, going directly from this, criminal activity, which, while you can never condone criminal activity, you should certainly understand the necessity for it in certain communities at times as a way of defending yourself. And he went directly from that into the military, and from that into building multiple companies that were very successful. So a very dominant individual, a very, commanding presence in any room. Lee Finger was a very charismatic, commanding, at times angry, and very, dominant individual. But you know what he taught me as well, and it's interesting. He taught me how to cry. We would be watching movies together. Oftentimes they would be these old war movies, and I loved watching them with him. And there'd be these moments where everyone would come together. There would be a last stand. People would make a sacrifice, and he would just start crying. He would be overwhelmed with his emotions, and especially if someone on the screen was going through something emotional and they were crying, he would just be sitting there, sobbing like. And I would look at him, and sometimes I'd make a joke, and he would say, "Shut up. If they get to cry, I get to cry." And I think about that because maybe that's why I'm okay crying as a man. Because even though I had a very masculine upbringing from him in that way, even though obviously I also had a lot of feminine influences from my mother and from my aunts, but I feel like having the exposure from a man that was my father figure, that was my authority figure, that was my example of masculinity, of what it could be and what it should be, I got a lot of examples of how to live. And not only did I learn when you have to be tough, but I also learned when it's okay to cry, and it's okay to feel, and it's okay to feel empathy. It's okay to feel grief. It's okay to feel stress and doubt. It's okay to not be okay. And I think that more men, especially men who are going through things like that gentleman who I picked up were going through, and so many others, need to know it's okay to not be okay. because we're often taught that it's not okay, and we're often taught that we can't be real men if we don't act a certain way. The thing is, you absolutely can. You absolutely can be an emotional person and tough when you need to be. Because there's no one right way to live. You have to just be in tune with yourself. You have to listen to yourself. You have to listen to the messages you're getting from the universe. And if you're feeling not okay, reach out, tell someone you're not okay, ask for help, because it's always okay to do that. Get therapy, talk to a friend, cry in front of someone you trust, cry in front of someone you're not sure how they're going to react, but maybe you just need to, you know? And if more people started taking that leap and being more vulnerable with themselves and with others and not afraid of how they're perceived in that way, I think the world will probably begin to be a better place. And I think it's actually already going that direction because we have so many younger individuals who are being raised a little bit different and who are having more exposure to some of these ideas. And it gives me a lot of hope. But I also know that we have a long way to go, and there's a lot of things to unravel and maybe deprogram. And there's some aspects of being a man that I think can be eternal, and there's some that maybe they're not as relevant anymore, even if they were to survive back in the day. And I can understand why my grandpa is the way he was. I can understand why he was raised the way he was raised in a lot of ways. But we're here, we're now, and our choices are our own. And it's important to take the lessons that we were given and sometimes take the lessons that we weren't by just seeing the ways that we don't want to live. And I choose to embrace the side of my grandpa that was kind and emotionally vulnerable and open with people and kind to strangers and generous to a fault sometimes, instead of the anger and dominance and power that a lot of men tend to pursue. And I certainly saw both in him, and I certainly saw that conflict in that gentleman in my car. And so I just thought that was a really interesting experience, and I wanted to share it. So thank you for listening. If you liked the story, if you liked the little family history, please do get engaged, comment, maybe share a personal story of your own, maybe ask me any questions if you're interested in anything else about my life, history, or experience, and we'll see what we come up with next time. But please do get engaged, do the likes, do the scribes, all that stuff. Thank you, and you have a wonderful night.